Hey, what's up guys, Omogonix here and welcome to part 16 of my tutorial series where I teach you guys how to make a first-person horror game in Godot. So to start off with this part, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be making a warning screen, because when you're playing a horror game, usually a warning screen will show up at the start to let you know that what you're about to play is a horror game. And, I think that is something which horror games, should have, of course. So yeah, that is why I'm going to be making a warning scene now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create a new scene by pressing the plus icon here. Then we go user interface, and then I'm just going to call this scene warning. And then what I'm going to do is I'm then going to go add child node, going to add a canvas layer, because I usually like to have a canvas layer with everything underneath it. And then I'm going to go right click on my canvas layer now, and then I'm going to go add child node again. And this time I'm going to be using a color rect. So a color rect is just going to be like the background basically. So we're just going to stretch this out so then it fills out this whole point here. And then we can make the color black, just like that. And then I'm going to go add child node again. And this time I'm going to add some text. So this is going to be a rich text label. And I am going to go BB code enabled and then bracket center bracket, and what that does is that will center our text now. So then I'm going to call this warning. So that's what that's going to say is warning. Just stretch it out so then it fills out our frame here. And then with the font size, going to go down to theme overrides, font sizes, and then we can just set the font size, might do 80, see how that looks, maybe 100. Yeah, 100 should be alright for this maybe. And then I usually like to set the text to red as well when doing these warning screens. And then we can just duplicate that text by clicking onto the text in the hierarchy, going Control D. Then now we can have some more text which basically just explains our little warning here. So we can turn down the font size, maybe something like 40. And also I usually like to, have this text be a different color to the text that says warning as well. Usually white I find to be a good pairing with the red. So with this text here, we can just do something like warning, this is a horror game. If you have any health conditions that may affect you in any way, or something like that. We can just do this for now, we can write a better warning later, but this is a horror game. If you have any health conditions that may affect you in any way, consider not playing. Something like that. So yeah, usually a good idea to have a little warning label with a horror game. Also it could just, be used as a way to, scare people a bit more. So then we're going to go canvas layer again. And then what I'm thinking we do this time is we do an animation player, so then we can actually fade in our warning. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to, we're going to do fades for the text. So we're going to go animation player, make sure you do add an animation player, and then animation new, and then I'm just going to call this fade. And then so I'm going to grab my rich text label here. In fact, I'm just going to call this warning text in the hierarchy. And then this here will just be description, just like that. And then I'll just call this color rect here BG, just so then we have a better idea of what these are. Alright, so in our animation player, at the start of the animation here, after creating the fade animation, I'm going to click onto my warning text. And then with the modulate, the color, I'm going to turn down the A, so the alpha, all the way down. So what that will do is that will just make it completely transparent. Then we can set the keyframe by clicking on the key here, create a reset track, and boom. So that's what the warning text will be set to at the start of the scene. We can do the same thing with the description text as well. Create reset track, and then boom. So for the warning as well, we might want this animation to maybe go for like 5 seconds, where it takes maybe a second to fade in, you see the warning for about 3 seconds or so, then it takes another second to fade out, so something like 5 seconds maybe we could try at first, see how that goes. So then at the 1 second mark here, we're now going to then just turn up the alpha, just like that, set the keyframe again, do the same thing with the description, and boom. In fact, something else which we could actually do is we could have the warning fade in first, then the description a tiny bit afterwards. So what we could do actually is we could like put this at maybe 2 seconds, and then move this over to 1, and we can just press Control C on that there, press Control V there, just to make sure that it's just to make sure that the animation transparency is set at the start, and then it changes at the 1 second mark only. Alright, I am going to save the scene as well now. I hate sometimes when I press Control S during a tutorial, and then it brings up this menu to save a whole new scene whenever I'm, working on a new scene, because then I gotta, go off track and then explain, oh, now I'm saving the scene. But yeah, I hate that. But anyways, so now let's get back to what we're doing here. So anyways, so here we have our warning animation so far. Basically our warning text first fades in, and then we have our text that fades in afterwards. So I'm going to change the animation length to 6 seconds, and then I'm thinking that about maybe 4 seconds or 5 seconds maybe. Here, wait. So at about 5 seconds we could have the warning text fade out again. So we'll click on the keyframe here to make sure that it stays red up until the 5 second mark. Then at the 6 second, we can then just turn down the transparency just like that. And boom. Alright, so then with the description text here, at the 6 second mark, by the time the warning label already fades fully out, what we're going to do is we're going to set the white keyframe, there we go. So then that just stays white, but then at the 7th second, that's when that will be faded out. Just like that. Alrighty, so let's take a look at this animation right now. So as you can see, the warning and the text just fade in, and then they both fade out, just like that. Also, since the warning scene is going to be the first scene that I want the game to open up to, I am going to click on my warning scene here in the File System tab, and I'm going to right click on it, and we're going to go set this as the main scene, and then you'll know what your main scene is because it will have blue text instead of white. So yeah. Alrighty, so now that we've got the warning screen animation done, what we can do now is we can now create a script. So I'm going to create a script, new script, and I'm going to save this into my general scripts folder, warning.gd, and create. Alright, so we don't need a process function for this. In my ready function, what we're going to do is we are going to do await. Oh wait, no. Before we do that, we need to do $animation player. So for me it's $canvas layer / animation player, since that is the path to my animation player in the hierarchy. And then I go .play and then fade, since that is my animation's name, and that will basically play the fade animation. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do await get_tree .create_timer. And then we're going to do an 8 second timer because the warning animation goes for about 7 seconds. So I think we'll do an 8 second timer. Then we'll do /false, since it's not like we want this to play when the game's paused, and then .timeout. And then after that we'll do get_tree .current_scene. Oh wait, no, not current_scene, sorry. We do change scene to file or change scene to packed. Both work just as well. So what we're going to do is after 8 seconds, we're then going to load up the intro scene, the game intro scene, which is the scene where we see the car driving along. Now, realistically, I don't want the game intro scene to be what the warning scene loads into. I want it to actually be the main menu which is loaded into. However, we have not made a main menu yet, so that is why I'm just loading it into the game intro scene for now. However, that is why later on in this video I am actually going to be making a main menu, so yeah. But anyways, without further ado, let's actually test out our warning scene so far and, just see how it goes. So let's go play, and let's see how our warning scene goes. Warning, this is a horror game. If you have any health conditions that may affect you in any way, consider not playing. And then boom, as you can see, the scene now loads up. Alright, so I can't think of anything else that we need to do for the warning scene. In fact, I think that's pretty much it. If you want to, you could maybe add in a spooky sound in the warning scene if you wanted to, but I'm not really going to do that for this tutorial since I think it is fine as is. So yeah, so anyways, as you can see here, I've got my pause menu scene open. And what I want to do for this tutorial is I want to actually get to making the menus, like our settings menu, our controls menu, and our main menu. Now the settings menu isn't going to be like interactive in this part, like I am going to be making an interactive settings menu in a future part, but in this part I'm just going to be making the look of the settings menu and adding in the settings themselves. I'm not going to be doing the scripting for it yet, so yeah, I just do want to let you guys know that. But anyways, without further ado, let's get to making some menus here. So first up, I think I'm going to do the settings menu. So I'm just going to close the warning here, and then we're going to go start up a new scene. So it's going to be a user interface scene, of course. Alright, so I'm going to change the type of this, of the parent node, to a canvas layer for now. If I decide to change my mind, you know, I will change it to a control node again, but right now with how I plan to structure the nodes in my scenes, I think I'm going to have this be a canvas layer scene for now. And then we're just going to call it settings. Alrighty, so now I am going to add a background, so we're going to go add child node, color rect, just like that. And then we're going to just make this maybe black, just a black background I guess, just like that. And then now we're going to be adding in some text again. Yep, some good old text again. I'm just going to be calling this settings. Now, I'm not going to be teaching you guys how to do literally, you know, every single setting that you can possibly do in a Godot game, but I will be teaching you guys, you know, some settings when we do get to that. So now that we have our settings text and our settings background, now let's get to adding in some buttons which will allow us to change our actual settings themselves. But first off, of course, we've got to save the settings scene. Also, I just realized, you know, I should probably save this into my UI scene, not my scenery scene. Should have done the same thing with the warning as well, but oh well. Anyways. Alright, so let's go add child node. And now the first setting that I'm thinking of adding will be a slider for the 3D scaling. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, wait, what do you mean by that? So let me show you guys what I mean by 3D scaling. So in our project settings here, if I go into my project settings, I just accidentally just select the debug thing, don't worry. Project settings, 3D scaling. Oh, was that not the correct thing? Ah, don't worry, I found it, it's right here. Okay, so with the scaling 3D, as you can see, it is set to 1 by default, but if we turn this down, as you can see, it makes things in your scene look lower quality. So now we've got this set to 0.25, and as you can see, it looks very pixelated here. But then if we set it back to 1, it is now very high res and sharp. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a setting for this, because this can be a good way for players with lower end PCs to, you know, get more performance out of your game. So if you do want players with low end PCs to be able to play your game as well, adding in a option for the 3D scaling is probably a good idea. So let's go into the settings here, and then we're going to go add child node, and I'm going to go H slider since we want a horizontal slider. And this is going to be for the 3D scaling. Now you can also customize the sliders if you want to as well for the settings. I might show that a bit later on, but for now we're going to be keeping the slider default. And because of that, since the slider is by default nearly black, we're actually going to change this color background here to a bit more of a lighter sort of color, maybe blue, red. Yeah, we'll go with a reddish color, you know, just to keep on theme. But yeah, so there we go, something like that. Alright, so now I'm gonna just duplicate this text here. Gonna move it down. Gonna turn the font size down to something like 30, and also you can change this to like a, you know, scale text or something, just so then you know what it is. And I'm gonna call this 3D scaling. And then we can have our horizontal slider right here for the 3D scaling. Now the thing about the 3D scaling is it does have a min and max value in Godot, so the minimum value for the 3D scaling is 0.25, and I don't know what the maximum is, I'm gonna have to check, but I think it might be something like, oh, it's 2, okay, so the maximum is 2, and the minimum is 0.25. Now, usually for my games, what I do is I set the max to 1 and the minimum to 0.25. The reason as to why I don't let the player go above 1 is just in case, you might get some low-end user who, is playing around with the settings and they might end up turning up the 3D scaling too much, which then could, really affect their system, maybe. So I just like to be real safe with that sort of stuff, and usually what I do whenever it comes to doing a 3D scaling slider for, my games, usually I go max value 1, min value 0.25, and then you could have like a step value of maybe something like 0.05. So if you don't know what the step value means, that basically means like how much the value goes up. So let's say, for example, right, you have like a minimum value of 2, but then a maximum value of 10, but then you have like a step value of 2. That basically means that you are counting up in steps by 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, rather than going by ones or something like that. So if we're doing 0.05, that means that as we change the slider, it's going to change by 0.05. So if the minimum value, so if our slider value is 0.25 and then I change it a bit, that means it's now 0.3. If I change it again, it's now 0.35, then 0.4 and 0.45. As you can see, even by a description, it says if greater than 0, value will be rounded to a multiple of this property's value. Alright, so that's going to be the 3D scaling slider there. By default, I usually like to have this set to 1 as the value. Also, I am going to change this to a scaling slider. Now, usually what I like to do in my Godot games, or just any of my games really, whenever I'm doing settings, is I like to group certain settings with certain categories, right? So let's say, for example, visual settings and audio settings and gameplay related settings, right? They'll all be in their own groups with each other. So with the 3D scaling here, right, I'm going to move this down a bit. So I'm going to move the text and slider down a bit, so then we can make some room for more text. So this text here is going to be, so with this settings text here, I'm actually going to move that up. I'm going to actually, with this settings text, I think I'm going to just middle it. So we're going to go BB code enabled, center, and just like that. And then so with this, we're just going to call this visuals, because this is going to be the visual settings. So first off, of course, we have the 3D scaling. But now what's next, you might be thinking? Well, we do have a bunch of different settings that we could set. Next up, let's add in a setting for the window mode, since that is a setting which is usually in most games, including my own. So I'm going to copy the scale text here, then move it down, and then we're going to type in window mode, since this is going to be for the player to set their window mode. And then we're going to add in an option button, so we're going to go add child node to our settings scene, option button it's called, and boom, so now we have an option button. So option buttons allow us to choose from multiple things. So with the items here, so when you add an option button to your scene, when you go to the item section here, as you can see, it will be empty, but we can go add element, and then now we have an element added. So if I was to type in something like, say, windowed, for example, and then with the selected value, if I was to change this to what the ID value is here, 0, as you can see now, now our option button is set to windowed. And then we can also add another element, and then I'm going to call this full screen. And then the third option I'm going to add is exclusive full screen, since they're like the 3 different sort of ways you can set your screen mode in Godot. So by default, I usually like to set mine to a full screen. And then with the font size here, you can change the font size on the option buttons as well. Just go down to theme overrides, font sizes, and then you can change the font size just like that. Now I'm not going to make mine 30, I'm going to make it 20. I'm just going to make it thin like that. And boom. So now the player can set their window mode. So when you go through the selected value, right, 0, 1, 2, they're the 3 different things we can move through. As you can see, it changes from exclusive full screen to windowed. So yeah. Another thing which games like to add as well is an option for VSync. So what we can do for this is we can go oh, and by the way, I'm going to change the this text here to window text. And then this option button here just to window mode. There we go. So with the window text, I'm going to copy this, paste it underneath, and we're going to call this VSync. In fact, we don't need the 2 dots afterwards because it's just going to be like a toggle. So we're going to move the text over a bit like this because we're going to put a button in front of it. Add child node, button. So it's just a regular old button. So with this button here, I'm just going to make it smaller. Just like that. And then I'm just going to put like either an X or an O. Usually I just do like an O or an X, it depends on the game. But yeah, that's usually what I do for the O's. I mean for the buttons here, the toggle buttons. We can set the font size for like 20, 30. Yeah, 25 should be alright. Make smaller just like that. So with these buttons, right, these are going to be our toggle buttons. This is going to be the toggle button for the VSync specifically. So when you want a button to be a toggle, what you do is you turn on toggle mode. So now when we press button pressed, it actually toggles it. Because if we have toggle mode on, if we have toggle mode off, right, whenever we press button pressed, it doesn't do anything. But if we have toggle mode on, now we can actually toggle between button pressed off and button pressed on. So by default in my games, I usually like to have VSync on, so I am going to have this button be on. And then I'm just going to call this a VSync button. And then this here can be VSync text. Just like that. Now another visual setting that I consider to be important is anti-aliasing. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this window mode text here. Just duplicate it. And then we're going to move this down here, and then we're going to type in anti-aliasing. So if you don't know what anti-aliasing is, basically it's what makes the edges of objects and stuff look smoother in games. So if you're not using anti-aliasing, the edges are going to look a lot more jagged and more pixelated. But basically anti-aliasing, it basically smoothens out those jagged edges and, you know, all those pixelated edges and stuff like that to, you know, make it look less pixelated and more higher res. But yeah. Alrighty, so with our anti-aliasing text here, we'll just, you know, have it like that. And then we're going to be getting the window mode option button, duplicating that since we're going to be using the option button here, just like this. And then now with the actual text itself, we are going to change what the text here says. So with the first item, instead of it saying windowed, it's going to say none, you know, in case you want to use no anti-aliasing. And then I'm going to be using FXAA, since that's an option of anti-aliasing, which you can actually, you know, play around with in Godot. By the way, if you want to see all the anti-aliasing options, you just go anti, just search that in, and then just look for anti-aliasing. There we go, anti-aliasing. As you can see, we then have our stuff here to do with the anti-aliasing, so MSAA, screen space AA, which is FXAA, and then also TAA as well. So yeah. So the options I'm going to be implementing here today are going to be none, FXAA, and then we're also going to have TAA as well. And then we can also have, you know, MSAA 2 times, MSAA 4 times, and then MSAA 8 times, since they're all the anti-aliasing options in the game. So by default, I usually like to do either none or FXAA, since that's like the lowest quality one. You know, it's just the fastest one. But yeah. So now we have anti-aliasing options. I'm also going to type in AA Should I type in AA button or just, yeah, we'll do AA button, just call it that. And then we'll call this AA text. Alright, so another option that I like to add is an FPS cap option in case the player wants to cap their frames per second. And there are various reasons as to why the player might want to cap their FPS. It could be because they don't want to use as much of their system's resources, since capping your FPS can actually, you know, cool down your PC if it's a bit too hot, you know, things like that. So I do like to include a, oh, by the way, I accidentally changed this here to AA text. This is meant to be vsync text. This here is AA text. But yeah, so what I'm going to be doing now is an FPS cap option. So we're going to be copying this, so duplicating, Control D. And then I'm going to be calling this FPS cap. And then we're going to be then duplicating this option button here. Just duplicating that, moving that down here. Just like that. And then we can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all of the options that we have here, just get rid of them all. Then I'm going to go add element, and we're going to add a new elements now. So for the first option, we're going to do 30 FPS. Then we're going to add in a 60 FPS option. And then uncapped. So yeah, there's going to be 3 options in this game, 30 FPS, 60 FPS, and uncapped. By default, we'll do uncapped, but yeah. Sometimes I like to do a 60 FPS as well. Alright, so now that we've got that basic stuff in, we can do other things like shadow filter quality and also shadow resolution as well. But I think what I want to do just for now is I want to add in some options now for the world environment stuff. So if we go into our level scene here, as you can see, we have our world environment. If you want to make use of things like SSAO, SSIL, and certain other options as well, it would probably be a good idea to actually include like a setting in your game, so then people can actually, you know, play around with these options here, and they can choose to enable the glow or the SSAO, so then they can get better performance if they find that these options are actually worsening their performance. Now, when it comes to my game, I don't even know if SSAO will even be an important thing to use, since, you know, I'm playing around with SSAO right now in my scene, you know, enabling and disabling it, and I'm seeing no change whatsoever. Maybe that's just because of how I've got things set at the moment, but right now, as things stand, you know, there is no real change when we do enable and disable SSAO at the moment. So what I'm thinking is that we just have it disabled at the moment, and we don't add an option for it at the moment. What about SSIL? Well, yeah, that does have a change, so yeah, we could actually have an option for SSIL. SDFGI, I think we'll just leave by default for now. We might change up some things to do with this. SDFGI, we might use reflection probes instead, but I'll figure that out later on. And also glow, we could add an option for as well. We could add an option for the glow, and volumetric fog. So what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to do a few options for certain post-processing effects here, or just certain effects here in the world environment node. So let's go add an option for SSIL to begin with. So I'm going to go back into my settings here, and so I'm going to grab my vsync text, and now we're going to duplicate, and then just move it down here. So now this is going to be for SSIL. So SSIL, in case you guys have forgotten, it stands for screen space indirect lighting. So basically it just affects the lighting of the screen of the scene. So then we're going to grab the button here, duplicate that, and then just move that down here with the SSIL. So then I'm going to call this SSIL button, just like that, and there we go. Oh, and also with this, I forgot to call this FPS button. And then this here can be SSIL text. And then this here, FPS text. I just like to name things to make sure I can keep track of what they are. So another thing which I can probably add an option for, as I mentioned before, is the glow. So we can add an option for the player to enable or disable the glow if they want to. So I'm going to go into my settings, and then we're going to grab the SSIL text, copy, paste it, and then we'll move it off to the side here and call it glow, and then we can grab the button, duplicate that, move that over here towards the glow, and boom, now we have this. So I'm going to call this glow text, and then we can call this here glow button, and boom. And then lastly for now, I'm going to add an option for the volumetric fog. So I'm going to go into my settings here, and we're just going to duplicate this, and we're going to make a setting for the volumetric fog, and then this will probably be the last world environment related setting for now. I'm going to call this a volumetric text, and then we have our glow button, duplicate. This is going to be the volumetric button, and there we go. Boom. So that there is our visual settings for now. One last thing which I'm going to do is a setting for the shadow filter quality, and then that will be the last setting which I do show you guys for the visuals here. When it comes to doing the scripting and stuff like that, right, if there's any other settings which you do want to add, you guys can teach that yourselves, of course, because it is, of course, good to, you know, teach things yourself, to learn things yourself as well. But I am going to be doing one last visual setting here. I will be doing a few audio-related settings as well, so don't worry. But this here will be for the shadow filter quality. And then we're going to be duplicating this option button here, moving that over here. And then with this, we can get rid of the items and then add in some new ones. So with the shadow filter quality, right, if we go into the project settings, and we check the shadow filter quality, so we go down to lights and shadows. So as you can see here, we have a shadow filter quality for both the directional and positional lights. Now, I'm going to be doing just one setting for both in this tutorial. We're not going to be separating them. But as you can see here, the options are hard, soft very low, soft medium, soft high, and soft ultra. Again, you can also change the resolution if you want to as well. But in this series, I'm just going to be teaching you guys how to change the filter quality. So anyways, with this option button here, with the options we're going to be adding in, the following. We're going to be adding in hard and soft very low. So it's pretty much just going to be all the options that we just saw before. And then soft low. And then soft medium. By the way, by default, I like to have it set to soft low, because that's like the default in Godot. Then we have soft high. And then last but not least, soft ultra. And then boom, that should be all the shadow filtering settings there done. Alright, so yeah, that's going to be it for the visual settings for now. If there's anything that I think of adding or removing later, then I will. But I'm just going to call this shadow button. And then this here can be shadow text. And boom. Alrighty, so now let's actually add in some audio related settings. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to grab my visuals text here, and we're going to go duplicate this, and I'm going to move this over to the right, and I'm going to call this audio, since this is going to be for the audio settings now. So we're going to have our audio settings over here, and then I'm going to grab my 3D scale text, and also my, my slider as well, so the scale slider and text, duplicate them. And then move them over here, just like that. Alrighty, so now with this scale text here, I'm going to move that over like this, and I'm just going to call this master volume. So this is going to be for the overall volume of the game, and we're just going to move that over like that. There we go. So for the volume, for the min setting, for the min value, I like to set this to 0. For the max value, I like to set it to 1. And then for the step, you can do what you like. I usually like to do 0.05 or something like that. And then next, we're going to be duplicating this text again, moving it down. And this is going to be for the sound effects. So this will only affect the sound effects. And then we're going to be doing a music volume as well, since I will be making music for this game. Alright, so I'm going to call this a volume slider, and then this here will be volume text. Alrighty, so sound effects volume, then we'll grab the slider, duplicate it, then we'll move it down here, because this is going to be for the sound effects volume, and I'm just going to call this sound effects slider, and then we have sound effects text. Alright, so as I did mention before, we're also going to do music volume, so I'm going to, well, first off we'll grab the text, duplicate that, drag that down, music volume, we'll call this. So yeah, when I do the coding for this settings menu, it will probably be in the next part most likely, since, I'll want to continue on from the settings menu. The coding will, you know, take a bit, but, you know, it'll be worth it in the end. Alright, so this is going to be called music slider, just like that. Alright, so now that we have our audio settings, our last thing we're going to be doing is the gameplay settings. So we're just going to drag this down here and we're going to call this gameplay. Now there's only one gameplay related setting which I'm thinking of adding right now, and that is mouse sensitivity. I can't think of anything else to add, so I'm just going to be doing mouse sensitivity and that will be it for this game. Oh, also with the text here, I think I should call this music text. There we go. And also make sure that your texts are above your interactables on the hierarchy, because otherwise that could overlap the interactables and then cause you to not be able to interact with them, so that is important. So anything at the bottom of the hierarchy is going to be above something. Oh, and also with this glow button here, I should call this a volumetric button. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to grab the music text here, and I'm going to now just duplicate it, drag it down, and I'm going to call this look speed, since this is going to be the speed of which our character is going to be able to look at whenever they're using their mouse to turn. So then the music slider, just drag that down here, and then this will be the look slider, we'll call this. And with the slider, so with our current sensitivity, what we have it set to is we have it set to 0.2. So using that as a standard, right, we could probably use our max value as like 0.5 and then maybe set our min value to something like 0.1. And then we could have our step value be 0.05. And then so with the value here, since 0.2 is my standard, I'm going to be setting that as the value of the slider. And there we go. So that there is pretty much they're pretty much the settings that we've got right now for our game. Again, I might change, like add or remove certain settings depending on what I want later on when we do end up actually doing the coding and stuff. But yeah, because before I do the coding for the settings, I want to, play around with the world environment a bit more. Try adjust the visuals a bit more of the game, see what looks good, see what doesn't. But yeah. Alright, so the last thing we're going to be doing for this settings menu is we're going to be, I'm just going to be duplicating one of these buttons here, so just this volumetric button, and I'm going to move this up to the top here. So what this is going to be is this is going to be an X, and I'm going to, a capital X will be better, and then I'm going to turn off the toggle mode, because we won't be needing that, because it's just going to be a pressable. So what this is this is going to be the button which we use to exit the settings menu. So whenever we want to exit the settings menu, we just press this button, and then boom, we exit the settings menu. Alrighty, so that there is pretty much the settings done. Alright, so I'm also going to call this a X button here, and boom, there we go. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the Play UI scene, and we're going to go instantiate child scene, and we're going to go add in the settings scene now. And we're going to do a bit of coding, so then we can actually open up the settings scene. So I'm just going to place it above this pause menu. There we go. So now let's go into our script view for the Play UI. So what I'm going to do at first is we're going to go in the ready function $ settings, and we're going to set it to false at first, since we don't want it to be we don't want it to be active at first. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new function. So I'm going to go create a new function. We're going to call it func open settings. So this is going to be the function which we use to open up the settings. So when we do this, we're going to do $pause menu dot visible equals false. And then we're going to do $dot settings dot visible equals true. So what that is doing is that is closing the pause menu and opening the settings menu when we press the button to open the settings menu in our pause menu. So then we can create a new function called func close menus. So this is what's going to happen whenever we press like the X button on our settings or our controls menu, right? What will happen is it will close our settings and controls menu, and then it will open up the pause menu again. Now we don't have a controls menu yet, we only have a settings. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do settings.visible equals false, but then pause menu.visible equals true. And boom, just like that. Something else which we can do as well is we can grab our interact.play, because obviously we want the interact sound to play whenever we press these buttons, so we can add that into the function as well, and boom. Something else which I like to do with my games too is I only like to have it so then the player can pause and unpause with the escape button whenever they're only in the pause menu, so when they don't have the settings menu open, for example. So down here in the process function as well, where we have the if input.isAction just pressed pause and safe UI not visible, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing end not settings dot visible. So we're checking if the settings aren't visible as well, and that's only when the player can pause and unpause. Alrighty, so now in our menu here, we're going to go into our pause menu. So with our settings button, what we're going to do is we're going to click your settings button, and then in your inspector menu, switch over to the node tab, then on pressed. You then just want to type in open settings as your function, since that's our function's name. I accidentally did a capital S there. There we go. Connect. And boom, now our settings is connected up. And then if we actually go into our settings menu, so we go right click on our settings, go editable children, then we go to our X button here. If we then press go on to pressed for this, and then we do close underscore menus, that will then set that function to our button on the settings menu, which closes the settings menu. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the player scene, the level scene, sorry, and I'm just going to go test out this scene, so then we can actually test out the settings menu opening. Alright, so here we are. When I press the settings button now, that should then open up the settings menu. And boom, as you can see, we now have our settings menu. So whilst we can't actually change the settings yet, you can actually click onto the buttons and stuff, and then, change around the options to see how the option buttons and all the other buttons work. So if you want to do that right now, you can. As you can see, I'm just switching between these options here. So when we do eventually do some coding, these options will actually have an effect. And then if we press this X button here, the settings menu then closes. Something else which you might want to do as well, because we don't have the hover sound on the X button yet, what we can do here is we can actually click onto our X button on the settings menu, and then where we have mouse entered, we can just do play hover, and boom, connect, just like that. And if you want to as well, you can do the same with all your other settings interactables as well, if you want to add the hover sound to them. In fact, I'm going to do it quickly right now. So play underscore hover, so what I'm doing is I'm just clicking onto all the interactables of the settings menu and attaching the play hover function to them. Alright, and then just one last one for the volumetric button, and boom, now the hover sound has been placed on them all. Alright, so let's go test out the scene again and see how it all goes. So now whenever I hover over any of these interactables here, the hover sound should play. So yeah, everything all works out. Alright, so I know I said earlier on in the tutorial that I was going to be making a main menu in this part, I'm pretty sure, but I am going to leave that for the next part now, since I didn't realize how long it was going to take me to do, setting up the settings menu stuff. But what I am going to do now, to end off this tutorial, is I'm going to make the controls scene, so then we can actually open up our controls menu, and then look at what our controls are for the game, if you forget what your controls are. So anyways, let's go do that. So I'm going to create a new scene, and it will be a user interface scene. I am going to change the node here, going to change the type to a canvas layer. And then I'm just going to call this controls. And now I'm going to do a color rect. So this is going to be, the background. I'm going to set this to something like black. There we go. And then just call it BG. And then we're going to add some text. So a rich text label. And we'll just do controls. Just type in controls and then theme overrides, and we're going to set the normal font size, maybe something like 50, and then I'm just going to copy this text, and then we're just going to drag its box down a bit, just like that, and then I'm going to make the font size smaller, so maybe something like 30, and then now I'm going to type in the controls. So my movement controls are WASD, so I'm going to do in brackets WASD, and then movement. And if you want to check what your other controls are, in case you forget, just check your input map settings, of course, where you can see what you have your controls set to. So my interact key is E, flashlight F, control is for crouch, you know, that sort of thing. Alrighty, so what we're going to do now is I'm now going to do E for interact, and then we'll do control for crouch, F for flashlight, and then escape for pause. So let me just check if I'm forgetting anything here. Apparently I've got a control for zooming as well. Now I can't remember if I did a zoom function in a previous part. If I did, then you know, I will add in the zoom control as well, but I just don't have a memory. If you guys are watching up to this part in the tutorial, be sure to let me know, did I end up doing a zoom function in an earlier part? Be sure to let me know, because I forget. But anyways, so here we have our current controls that the player can see for the game. So now I'm just saving my scene into the scenery folder. There we go. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my settings menu here, grab the X button, going to go copy it, and then we're going to go paste it in the controls menu just like that, and boom. Alrighty, so now we have our controls menu. So now what I'm going to do is I'm now going to go into my player UI scene, and we're going to go add in the controls menu now. Just like that. Just drag it underneath the fade UI. We're going to go into our player UI script, and just like what we did with the settings, we are going to actually create functions, well, a function to open the controls menu, and then we can add in the controls visible equals false into here. So what I'm going to do right now is func open controls, and then $interact.play, so then we play the interact sound when we press the controls button. Then of course we just disable the pause menu, so we can just grab this and then paste that there. And then we do $controls.visible equals true, and that will be used to open up the controls menu. Alrighty, so then in the close menus thing here, we can just do we can just enter in $controls.visible equals false, and boom, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is so now I'm going to assign the controls button to the open controls function. So click on your controls button if you've got one, and then I'll just switch over to node tab, and then double click on pressed here, because we're going to be setting the pressed signal, and I'm going to be setting it to open controls. And there we go. So now a player can actually open up the controls menu, but they need to also be able to close it as well. So we're going to click on the controls, right click, editable children, X button here, pressed, double click on that, and then close underscore menus, and there we go. And boom. Alright guys, so that's pretty much going to be it for part 16 today. Sorry if it feels like we didn't do too much. I know we, you know, created a settings menu and also a controls menu as well for the pause menu. Oh, and also we created a warning screen as well, so it was mainly just UI related stuff today. And in the next part, do expect there to be more UI related stuff, since we're going to be actually, you know, adding in some scripting for the settings menu. So hopefully you guys do get some use out of that, since I know a lot of you guys have been asking me for a while now for a settings menu type of video. And yeah, so anyways, that's the end of this one. Be sure to see you all next time, and bye bye.